Richard, I've heard actors and filmmakers over the years tell me that they want to make at least one of two different genres, a Hitchcockian thriller and a Western. Now I look back and I think the only time you've done a Western before was Gunsmoke and the Big Valley back in the day. Is that one of the things that attracted you to this project?
No, as a matter of fact, I don't have either of those ambitions. I had the specific ambition of making films that reflected my own political and spiritual outlook on life. And I succeeded many more times than I failed. So I'm very proud of my body of work.
Well, what drew you to this particular project, to the point that you signed on as an executive producer?
Well, I actually found that the film was a metaphor for America, and it was, and that was something I didn't expect. And when I saw it, I thought, that's a gutsy thing to do. And what I mean is, America was started as a garbage bin. It was started where they dumped prostitutes and debtors and card sharps and like that.
People like my father, for example, an Irish immigrant.
And mine, and you know, we just divvied up all the criminal behavior between the Irish, the Italian, and the Jews. The Jews took accounting and kosher food, and the Italians took the police and sanitation, and the Irish took the police and the 5 points, the gangs of the 5 points. And that was America for 100 years. But they had this amazing birth tale, which was to fire the monarch and the aristocrats, to fire them for fraud, and then to give to the poorest of the poor the right to learn how to read, write, and do sums, and in the doing, learn how to think clearly. And then we said to them, and now you can run the country. And no one had ever said that before. And it took them 50 years to believe us, but eventually they did. And we actually have presidents, many of them, who started in a log cabin and ended up president. And you don't know of any other nation that ever did that. And the powers of Europe would have cheerfully come over here and strangled each of us in our beds. But they didn't have the chance because we had already beaten the British Navy and they had no way of getting here. So we just decided to go ahead and try it. And we did.
And this movie reflects a cross-section of the different people who were pioneers, who did go out west. And many of them because they were running away from something.
Oh, you got it? Okay, go ahead, sorry.
And you and your co-star play a couple who would have been ostracized just about everywhere else at that time.
Absolutely.
And I think, except for maybe John Randolph and Hume Cronin in There Was a Crooked Man, this is the only time a couple like that has been represented in a Western. Is that something else that attracted you to the project? That, I want to play somebody who's never been in this type of movie before, maybe.
Well, I'll tell you, because of the current fad of political correctness, that was for me the least interesting, because I knew that, everyone in Hollywood is obsessed with being politically correct and catering to the ones in line who are yet to be treated fairly. And so that I knew was going to happen. No one was going to make a film today without that sense of political correctness.
Inclusiveness.
Yeah. And I think that it's all well and good when you say it, but it's also not the way art should be run. Art is art, and it should be amoral. It should be without ethics and morality. And then once it is accomplished as art, then you see what did it reflect of us, and what truths did we find in it. But to go out and say that's why we made this film,
no.
Yeah, that's wrong.
But on the other hand, you've seen a lot of Westerns. I've seen a lot of Westerns, and you've often wondered, well, what does the bartender do when the saloon closes? I mean, does this fellow ever have a life? I think the entire run of the series Gunsmoke, I think the bartender played by Glenn Strange had one episode focused on him. And it's like, decades, almost a century of Westerns. It's like, well, what happens when, it's after last call?
Yeah. Not only that, but most of the time you could not sustain an hour-long show talking about the bartender's secret stamp collection.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't do it. And then it was realized only in the 20th century that our sense of history was only about commanders, presidents, leaders, and not normal people, until Simon Schama wrote a book called The Great Cat Massacre. And it was about the baker's apprentices in Paris who just were so overwhelmed by these fucking cats that they went mad one day and chopped them all up and killed as many as they could. And what he did was inadvertently, he revealed normal people and normal reactions to things. And it changed the teaching of history. So this country was actually a country that sent out invitations to the poor. They'd never had that. And we said, you come here, we'll teach you to read, we'll teach you to write, we'll teach you to do sums, and then you can do whatever you think will make you happy. Not what will make us happy, but will make you happy. And that was about as extraordinary a statement as you could possibly imagine. And we fulfilled that, for all intents and purposes. We really did do that.
Well, it's funny. my father, God rest his soul, uh, never could quite figure out what it was I did for a living when I was a film critic. You know, his idea was, you know, you go to the movies and then you write down what you think about it. Or you talk to the people who make the movies and you write down, and they pay you for this. And I would always tell him, yes, Dad, that is why you came to the land of opportunity, so your son could get a scam like that going on. And Richard, when you think about it, I mean, you know, I get paid to go to the movies. You get paid to play dress up.
Yeah, I get to lie. Of all the art forms that have ever been, mine is entirely based on pretense. The clothes you're wearing are not yours. You just lie and say they are. The words you're saying are not yours. You're just pretending. You pretend that you don't see the stagehand standing off stage. And most of all, you pretend that you don't see the audience staring up at you. And the audience pretends that it's not an audience. And everyone is pretending. And out of that house of pretense comes truth and art.
And you have another gift in this profession, is that, you know, you get to try on other lives the way most of us. I'll try on this coat and see if it fits me, you know, or I'll try this jacket, I'll try this suit. And, you know, I look at your credits, and you have an extraordinary diversity in your work. You know, everything from a pushy lawyer in Night Falls in Manhattan to, you know, shark expert in Jaws, to, you know, a Wild West saloon keeper in Murder in Yellowstone City. Is that something that keeps you going? I mean, really, it keeps the profession fresh to you all the time after all these years. The fact that, oh boy, I get to take on another life.
You've heard the expression, does a duck have lips? You know, of course, it's the most fascinating thing in the world. And actors, if they're bright, have an advantage over everyone else, because you do get to understand someone like Dick Cheney or Adolf Hitler, because if you're honest, you can find them in you, in the same way that you can find Jesus in you. And so you don't have to go very far to find Dick Cheney. And it's a leg up for actors. When an actor says he wouldn't do that, you know, about the character, listen. Because if an actor's saying that, for the most part, he's got a reason. He may not be able to articulate it, or then again, he may. I do. And so, and I like to say, he wouldn't do that. And Dick Cheney, who, you know, is a person who, as a culture, we all kind of thought he was disgraceful. At the same time, he represented us in a very real way. And he was a greedy, selfish, cunning businessman. And he did most of the things he did for his own aggrandizement. And at the same time, that's called policy. And you learn a lot about this form of government, which relies on people. And you have to ask yourself, are we relying on people at their worst or at their best? And for the most part, we've been relying on people at their best until recently, when now we've decided to make that, let's rely on them at their worst. So we stopped teaching them anything at all about running the country and the sovereignty of the people and the revolution and all of that. And we just started cheating our own children. We don't hate our kids, do we? No, we don't.
Hope not.
But we treat them like we do.
I'm wondering, because of the diversity of your work, I mean, obviously, when you're recognized in public, I mean, I'm sure most people want to talk to you about Jaws. They want to talk about Close Encounters of the Third Kind. But are you ever surprised by some of the other roles, some of the other films that people don't talk about? I mean, gosh, I didn't know anybody saw that, or anybody remembered that.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did an X-rated film.
Inserts.
And I've done films that, if anyone ever walks up to me and says that they loved Let It Ride, I say, you're a degenerate gambler. And they go, yeah, I am. Yeah. So and when I did Mr. Holland, I was not only playing teachers that I knew, I was playing my fantasy of me as a teacher, of what I would do and how I would do it.
Mm-hmm.
And
mm-hmm.
and I will tell you a quick story. The man who wrote that screenplay was in a traffic
Opus. Yeah.
And he was in a traffic jam in West LA, and he couldn't quite see what the traffic jam was about. And this cop was walking on the sidewalk, and he said, what's going on up there? And the cop said, oh, there are some people who are striking. They have these placards, And he said, who are they? And the cop said, teachers. And the guy managed to turn his car out of the jam, turn around, go home, and wrote that script in 2 weeks, because he had been forcibly reminded of what he owed and to whom he owed it. And instead of treating them that way, we pay them like kitchen help and accuse them of being liars. And they're not only frontline troops, they are the ones who save parents from serving long prison terms for manslaughter.
Well, it's funny. I recently ended my teaching career, about 20 years. And actually, one of the movies I often showed to students was Quiz Show, a movie you produced. And there's a part in there where Ray Fiennes is asked, as a professor, what do you make per week? And he says something like, $125. And I would always stop the movie to say, let me tell you guys, things haven't changed that much.
Yep.
getting back to murder in Yellowstone City. I really enjoyed one of your early lines where you're talking to the fellow and you're quoting Shakespeare, but then you warn him that you know you might not want to do that here because people want to know what you're talking about. And there are times I think now, I can only imagine, I was in drama school. I was a drama major for 3 years and I quit because A, I didn't have the fire in my belly for it. And B, I was the worst actor in all of Christendom. But I know enough to say when I'm reading a script and I see a line and I'm going to get to say that line, it's like, yeah. Were there any lines like that in this one? Was that one of them?
In this film, I don't recall it at the moment, but there have been certainly films where I've had lines that I could not wait to say. And yeah, as a matter of fact, in Mr. Holland's Opus, there's a bunch, and one of them is when he's talking to the school board at the end, and he says something about, you didn't behave like this when you were my student, did you? And the guy says, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. He says, that has everything to do with what we're talking about. And it did. And I remember when I was in high school, I was a junior and I led the anti-dress code movement. And we won. And it was a very big deal. And I came back to school after I graduated, and a friend of mine was now principal. And we were talking in the main hall when the bell rang for the classes to break. And girls walked out of their classrooms and they were wearing blouses that were open to the navel without bras. And the guys were all in tight leather. And it was disconcerting, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at my friend and I said, how is it? And he said, it's rough. It's really rough. And I realized that I had made a mistake, that I had led the anti-dress code without realizing why they had one.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Richard, you've been very generous with your time. I've really enjoyed talking with you. And, I know you hear this all the time, but I have, respected your work for a long time. There was actually a time when people say told me we looked a little bit alike. That's when I had the rimless glasses like you did in Jaws. And of course, I always agreed. I said, oh, yes. So yes.